Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lake of Voices. So, I've decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to start runs and then follow them through and see if I can get the character Kikka to get to the end. Now, there are probably going to be some deaths along the way, like in the last video, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to see most of the choices through to the end. So I was informed by a viewer subscriber that the endings are different based upon your relationship status with the other characters. And with that, I think so far in the last couple of episodes, or the run number 2, I've made choices where Kikka ended up alone, but I don't know that that's necessarily for the bad. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see how far back we need to go to get Kikka to actually get to the other side of the lake. So what I'm gonna do is, if you remember from the last video, I had Kikka run away from the prowler that caught up to her after she got separated from Margaret and the guide. So I'm gonna go back, and instead of running from the prowler, I'm gonna have her stare it down and see if we come up with a different ending, or maybe even go back as far as the impasse, because when we ran past it, we became its target. But it may have been just walking aimlessly and may have just shuffled away. So I don't know whether or not that was a better choice, is to let it pass and hope that we don't catch its attention and we could continue on. But then again, we could have had the guide. The guide could have lied to us. We know nothing about the guide at this point. So all I know is what I've played so far, and so although it's not going to be 100% blind, it pretty much is going to be blind. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to skip pretty much everything up until those choices. I'm going to use this video as kind of a investigate alternate paths and see where we go from there. So if you would like to see the beginning, I'm going to consider this part of run 2. Just, it's the alternate paths from what I had chosen, but still the direct result of some of the choices that happened in run 2. And then when I start run 3, or what I'm going to call run 3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a theme. So for example, I'm going to take the options that get Kikka closer to Margaret or to Bemelle or whatever, and I'll do alternate paths going through there if, somehow that particular person dies, or if Kikka dies. So again, what I'm going to do is when I start those runs, what I'll do is, instead of doing what I'm doing today, I'm going to start those from the beginning and make it as though, so like if you wanted to watch specifically her interactions with that specific character, you could watch from the whole way through if you were a fan of that particular character that I'm trying to get Kikka close to. And with all of that said, I'm sorry for the long intro here, but with all of that said, I'm going to skip ahead and hopefully remember to make some saves so I can go back to some other points. So please bear with me, and we'll get right back into it. All right, welcome back everyone. So I have chosen the option to run past it again, but this time, instead of running from it after we get tripped up, I'm going to stare it down and see if there's any difference there. We could very well have died or set the path to dying as soon as basically we brushed off Lou. So again, I don't know what's going to happen, so we're both going to get in for it at this point. So I'm gonna start the narration back up, and hopefully we see where this goes. I hope this will go a little bit further. All Alright, I'll start from here. I looked behind me to see if it at least decided to come no further. Horrified, I realize it's pointedly following me. It is no longer mindlessly dragging itself through darkness. I have become its target. Its limbs bend wildly and unnaturally. It looks as though it's only barely keeping itself upright as its torso wobbles on its hips. That isn't stopping it from giving chase. I focus my view back ahead and continue to run. My breathing rapidly becomes ragged. I can still hear the squishing footsteps of the prowler behind me as it lunges its body forward in that unnatural gait. Without warning, the bridge lurches to one side. And this is where Kikka falls down. Catching me completely off guard, I lose my footing and slam onto the damp surface of the bridge. My light falls with me, painfully snuffing out. Splashes and the excited stirring of many voices come from the lake. How? Why? Is it rotting? Or did they push the support beams? I'm left with no time to wonder the mystery as the monster draws close. I scramble back onto my feet as it closes in. Grabbing my dark lantern, I resume running to put some distance between us again. I open the latch on my lantern and pull out a match. I'll have to slow down, at least briefly, to properly light the flame without it blowing out. With death still on my heels, I must not let one precious moment be wasted. Set on my plan, and with everything in hand, I begin to decrease my pace and light the lantern. Moving as fast as I am capable, I place a lit match inside the lantern and the oil catches fire. As the flame grows, I can hear the awful footsteps behind me begin to peter out. I steal a glance behind me. It has truly stopped. The return of light seems to catch it off guard, and thankfully it declines coming closer. Let's stare it down this time. Last time I ran, and it caught me. I managed to calm my mind down from the commotion and recall what the guide said when we first encountered a prowler. You don't have to run or fight. You only need to keep moving while keeping an eye on it. I can't keep on running forever, and doing so only seemed to invigorate them further. I fix my stare on it forcefully as the creature recoils from my relit lantern. Moving at a steady but brisk pace, I continue forward, making sure to check behind me often. Yeah, so that's right. The guide did say, you don't need to run from it. Just make sure you keep tabs on it. And that's what Bemelle was doing. He was keeping tabs on it for the most part, the one that was following him. So I guess that's why running was a bad idea, because if you run, it will come after you. So that's probably why we died. Alright, so currently we're still trusting that the guide telling us to go back, find our way west was still the truth. And so I still don't know anything about this guy. So I don't know whether to trust him, but the fact that stories have said that he's led people across safely kind of indicates that he's still willing to help people, but he's been very dispassionate for pretty much most of the journey. So I really have no idea if he has any sense of humanity within him. So I don't know. We'll find out. Alright, moving at a steady but brisk pace, I continue forward, making sure to check behind me often. It creeps at a distance. However, the thing makes no more dramatic attempts to engage with me, choosing only to lurk. I'm set on edge by its presence, but in a way is strangely beneficial. It makes it harder to get lost within my own mind when the tension in the air is so high. Reaffirming my goals, I go down bridge after bridge, making my way to what I can only hope is the way out. Eventually, the prowler halts at the precipice of one of the branches. Frustrated, it paces back and forth on the border as though something is physically stopping it from going further. I wonder if that means that we're getting closer to the guide, and if there's something specific about the guide, because he, in his argument with Margaret, he had said that he has already died. So I wonder if he's like a spirit of some sort, with his presence being hurtful or harming to the prowlers and the Nixi. But at the same time, I wonder if maybe he's actually one of the Nixi and is feeding people to them at some level. All right, well, let's continue. I decide to take that as a good omen. The journey of mine returns to one of isolation. Even the whispers of Sinnlos have ceased. Suddenly, I realize through the fog, the black sky is turning dark blue. Dawn is beginning to rise. At this point, there's no use in keeping up my strength. Yeah, because that means that the bridges are going to soon be going out of sight and leaving you to possibly drown in the water. So she's got to hurry. I sprint down the bridge, going faster and faster as I hold out for some sort of sign, anything. Eventually, I receive one. The silhouette of land peeks into my field of vision. I can scarcely believe it as I blink away the tears. With renewed spirit, I press down the bridge with increased speed, desperately trying to outpace the sun. The glowing orb peeks into view against the obscured sky and begins to ascend unfeelingly. With each step, the sky brightens ever so slightly more. I race through the oppressive fog and there's a voice in the distance. It isn't the horrifying sounds of monsters looming. It's Margaret. She's calling out for me. I shout back to her through the dark, foggy void. My voice comes out as a horribly weak wheeze between deep, shaky breaths. I'm almost certain she couldn't hear me. I'm not bothered by that, however. I will find her. I'm coming, Margaret. Please, just wait for me. I keep running against the increasing light, and her figure comes into view, here, on the bridges. I see Margaret standing in the middle of the bridge, squinting her eyes as she tries to make out what's in the distance. She notices me as I draw closer and widens her eyes. I stop unsteadily in front of her and stumble slightly. She nervously catches me before I topple over. I barely choke out a sentence as I strain to catch my breath.
Why are you here?
I couldn't just stay on the shore and wait. Not when you weren't there. I had been calling for you and I thought maybe if I went out a little farther you might have a better chance of hearing me.
Wow, she really tried to help out. Even though I'm greatly relieved she's here, I grow cross with her for taking such a reckless risk with her life.
The bridges could have sunk.
I don't agree.
I blink in utter surprise, shocked she would make such a bold statement in response to my chiding. She smiles coyly.
The two of us are going to make it back, no matter what.
Wow, damn, girl power. I grin, my strength rapidly returning. Margaret speaks to me softly as she tugs at my clothing slightly to lead me her way.
The shore is just that way. Let's go.
The two of us tear across the bridges in that direction, Margaret points out, and just as she promised, the end comes into view. Against all the odds, we both make it. I nearly tumble off the bridges onto solid ground. I crouch on the ground and lay my head between my legs, unable to stand. I rest there quietly for a few moments, taking time to allow my breathing and emotions to settle down. Finally, I look up from my lap to see Margaret standing ahead of me. Her face is buried in her hands. However, it's out of disbelief rather than the sorrow it's been countless times in the past 2 days. She lifts her head out of her hands, and the both of us make eye contact. No words need to be exchanged between us to know what the other is thinking. I'm glad for it because I'm not sure I would be able to speak even if I needed to. The sound of sloshing and wood lurching captures our attention as the bridges begin to sink. In a few moments, only the lonely dock is left. With that, the guide walks toward me.
It is time to leave this place. There is nothing left for you here.
Upon being addressed by him, I rise to my feet. He has a calm look on his face, though there is force behind his serenity. I open my mouth in an attempt to speak, however I quickly realize I have little idea of what to say. Do I thank him for this? Should I give him my trust? Was our survival because of him, or despite him? Even now, I cannot know for certain. Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know whether or not, whether to trust him or not. I mean, it seemed from his argument with Margaret when the bridge collapsed in front of Kikka, it seemed as though he was telling her that there's no way for Kikka to get back to them. But at the same time, he gave actual thoughtful directions because we followed his direction as Kikka and we got to the end here. So, I mean, that accounts for something, doesn't it? And then the fog is removed from my thoughts. After everything that has happened, it becomes clear. I harden my face to match his serious disposition. There is certainly something he is certainly right of. This lake isn't a place to linger. Going round and round in circles will never help. We cannot submit our lives to our minds to Sinnlos. For better or for ill, there is only one person who can help those once they are within its grasp: the guide. If he were removed, the place would be no safer. What I must do if I truly want to defend the others is keep them from coming here at all. When I return to my village, I intend to make that information acutely known to our elder. For that to happen, we must leave.
Goodbye.
His eyes narrow as he looks over me. I begin to feel uncomfortable under his scrutiny, but for a moment, I could swear I noticed him smiling slightly. However, it could easily be a trick of the morning sun. I look away to face Margaret, not wanting to get caught up with this any longer.
Margaret, will you be coming?
Margaret's gaze goes past the guide and me. She fixates on the lake forlornly. I feel hopelessness emanating from her. She lost something important from the inside of her in that lake, something she will never get back. I empathize greatly with her, knowing that feeling is one we will never escape from, even after this lake is far behind us. Margaret seems to shake the feeling off and turns toward me. The smallest amount of smiles graces her lips as she nods.
Yes, I'm coming.
Margaret's vigor returns to her at the end of that sentence. She speaks with a little bit of the confidence she had at the beginning of the journey. She gives one last look to our lead. Her gaze is harsh and scrutinizing. I'm not entirely sure what she's trying to convey with that look, but that isn't for me to know. Margaret definitively turns. She then walks towards the forest. I can't help but wonder what will become of her now. Perhaps she will tell me one day. Despite the firmness I so painfully tried to have, my heart starts to waver. Bemelle, Lou, they're both still here. I wish to give them a proper farewell. I want to do something. My eyes begin to water, and I almost turn back around. No, it is done. I need to remember that. They would never want me to ascribe their lives to Sinnlos. Nothing would disgrace their memory more. I will keep them in my thoughts without allowing the lake to poison me. With my steadfastness truly regained, I march into the light with no hesitation. With a solemn heart, I at last arrived at Hemmer. They were grateful to see me, for it was a desperate situation indeed. The urgency meant that my mind was occupied with other matters. I worked tirelessly to aid Hemmer's own guards in forcing back the brigadiers. But during the moments of calm, and when the sun went down, I would remember the lake. The villagers were alarmed when I arrived on my own, but it did not take them long to guess what must have happened to Bemelle. Having to recount the terrible story was almost more than I could endure. Yet I know that it will be even worse when I must tell my fellow guards back home. They deserve to hear the truth from me, regardless of how I feel. Margaret and I parted ways before I arrived at Hemmer. She did not say where she would be going or what she would be doing. She did, however, put on a smile as she departed, which I felt was more for my sake than her own. I hope she is well, wherever she is, and I would like to think that somehow we may see each other once more on another day. When receiving payments for his services, the guide must give a report of all those who both succeeded and failed to cross the lake. His retelling of events had little to say of Lou. I know that is because he was not meant to be there and was never one to open up, but it still saddens me to face how I never truly got to know who he was. I can only pray that those who cared for him will learn the truth of what happened. I have not heard nor seen the guide since then. He will remain obscured in that realm of fog and fear, a mysterious light off in the distance that is never out of reach of the real world. I worry about when I must return home to my usual life. It will be difficult to continue as things were before. One thing I know for certain is that my village elder must be told that no one is to cross Sinnlos again. I have already told the Hemmer leaders the same. Not a single more person should have to experience what we did. Its darkness will remain with me for the rest of my days. Though so much was lost, I try to believe that our lessons will keep others from suffering the same way and, in the end, something will be gained. Wow! Yeah, so I was right about, like, you know, the choice to run was the wrong choice, and making the choice to stare down the Prowler did result in Kikka surviving. So I was so close to making it to the end, guys, even in my blind playthrough. And, you know, yeah, she lost something, but she's trying to make something of it, trying to make, like, something good come out of what has gone badly, you know, the loss of Bemelle and of Lou. You know, she's trying to tell people, don't go through there. It's terrible. It's awful. And Margaret, like, going through something like that kind of trauma, yeah, she would have lost something. I don't know what was the reasoning for why she wanted to cross, had to cross. I figure if we get close to her, she'd probably reveal why. And we could probably also get close to Lou and figure out why he was there. Why was the guide so against him in the first place? Was it because he decided to travel across the lake despite his warnings or without his permission? But I think for the next run, I think what we're going to do is we're going to do a Bemelle run, where what we're going to do is we're going to do all the decisions, or at least as many of the decisions as we can, that would get us closer to him. And if there is some kind of, like, well, maybe if we choose this path, maybe he won't be very receptive of it. Maybe what we'll do in those instances is just, like, screw everyone else. We're gonna go Bemelle. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a break, and then we'll go back in. We'll start over from the end. We'll start over from the beginning, and we'll pretend like it's a brand new, like, start to the game, and I'll read all the narration like I have been, but as a separate video. And this time we'll go through and we'll try to be close to Bemelle, and we'll try to keep him alive, keep him safe. And maybe, like, I don't know, maybe there'll be a budding romance between the two. It seemed like that was going in that direction. So I guess we'll see how that goes. I hope you'll come back and join me for that and see what happens between the two. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye. And until then, bye.